past time most people have joined, we'll go ahead and get started so that you have the optimal amount of time to speak to everyone and so people can do Q&A and all those things. So we'll start with the formalities. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Amplify session. We are here with Shahala Madavi. We are so excited. We're going to be talking all about crafting your narrative and storytelling through your pitch deck, which is very, very important. I mean, most of us here are founders. We work with founders. We are aspiring founders. And we all know that most of the time, the most memorable part of the pitch is the storytelling aspect. The way that you tell the story of your startup is so, so important to create that. Oh, your autopilot was talking
Yeah.
to me to create that narrative and relatability. So we're so excited to have you here with us once again today for a really awesome pitch. If you did not join us back in February, when she did a presentation all about creating accessible products, that session was so helpful, you all. As a founder myself, and as someone who helps founders, I highly, highly, highly recommend that if you did not get to join us then, that you check out that session. The recording is on our YouTube, Amplify Louisville YouTube channel, because Shala dropped so many gems on creating accessible products for everyone to be able to utilize. And so with that being said, we'll go over a few housekeeping things. Everyone should be on mute upon entry. If you have questions throughout, throw them in the chat and we'll either get to them throughout the session or answer some questions at the end. And if we need clarity, we'll just ask and you can come off of mute. You should be able to take yourself off of mute. Having your camera off is not a requirement, but if you would like to keep it off, feel free. But if you'd like to cut your camera on, feel free to do so as well. We will be interacting in the chat, especially me throughout. So if you have questions or comments, feel free to throw them in the chat. We want you all to chime in along the way. And with that being said, Shala, I'm going to exit and let you take over. If you need me, I'm here.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you
Thank
so much,
you.
Kiana. I appreciate that. I appreciate that warm intro, and I'm glad that you were able to get some good knowledge out of the accessibility talk. I think that was a really good one. And I'm super excited to be back today to talk about crafting compelling narratives. So give me just one second. Let me get my screen share turned on here. Okay. And hopefully you guys can see my screen. All right. So Kiana, just give me a head nod. You can see my screen okay? Awesome. Okay, great. So as Kiana said, my name is Shala Madavi. Shala, it rhymes with Hala, so it's dorky, but that's hopefully an easy way for you all to remember it. And I'm very excited to be here today to be talking about storytelling inside of the framework of a pitch deck and how we can kind of make our stories more compelling, more impactful, moving through the narrative of a pitch deck. So let's see here. Oops. So a little bit about me, and I'll kind of fly through this because we have a lot of information to cover today, guys. So I'm gonna make this portion really short and sweet. So I have been a designer. I've been in the design industry for a little over 14 years now. So definitely aging myself, but it's been a phenomenal journey. I've been very fortunate in my career to have served in pretty much any role a designer can serve in, everything from production design all the way up to being creative director, running my own department. I even was a front-end developer for a little while. So my career has kind of run the gamut in terms of design and the design field. I have a little over 200 websites and digital products under my belt that I've been fortunate enough to play a part in. I've been a part of over 65 brand identity launches, and I need to update my number because this number has risen, but because I've been doing a ton of decks lately. globally. But my number here is 60 over 60 decks for VCs and startups. Studio Mod really exists to work specifically with investors, entrepreneurs, and the people that they impact to create a more equitable future through design and storytelling. And then here's kind of my just a few of the clients that I've been very privileged to work with. So today we're going to be talking about storytelling in the context of a pitch deck. And as humans, we are natural storytellers, right? Like we love stories. We are constantly telling stories, whether we realize it or not. And this can be traced back to, from to the caveman days, the days of cave people, telling stories with our family. If we're out to, we might be out to coffee or having drinks with our friends. We're telling stories that way. We're reading books. We're going to movies. We're watching plays. We're watching reels or TikToks, and those are full of stories. So we are just made of stories as humans. So how can we kind of work this into the framework of a pitch deck? And I think there's a couple of hard truths that we need to address here before we really get into it, and why storytelling is important when you're talking about pitching to investors. And I think the first hard truth that we're all probably aware of, but it's worth mentioning, is that attention spans are shrinking. And this is probably only going to become more of a problem as time goes on. Our attention spans are we're constantly being ripped away to pay attention to a million different things all at once. And so Mr. Goldfish here, he has an attention span of about 9 seconds. And then Mr. Finance Bro over here, he has an attention span. The average human right now has an attention span of 8 seconds. And if you are presenting virtually, you're also competing against things like Slack, email, text. There's just tons of competition out there for what is vying for your attention. So creating a story is one way to kind of sink in and really hit home early on in the process to really grab someone's attention. Um, Another hard truth is that, you put all of this time and energy and effort into building out your product and creating your pitch deck. And on average, the investor is going to spend about 2 minutes and 41 seconds reviewing your deck. And to be honest, when I saw that fact, I was actually a little surprised because I thought it would be even less. But it's a really short amount of time when you consider how much time and effort you've put into crafting your deck. So kind of, taking a look at the year in the life of an investor, here's another hard truth. So they may look at, say, 850 different companies. Of those, they might take 10% of them may result in a call or a meeting. And of those, you might have 1% that get invested in. So again, you're really vying for attention, really trying to create something that's memorable, that's going to stand out. And then another hard truth, there's a lot of competition just within the entrepreneur community. There are a lot of people out there that want to get an investor's attention. They're pitching to investors all the time, whether it's a pitch competition or you're at a cocktail party or you happen to be at a networking event. So there's tons of competition out there, whether it's from the digital space or a physical space. You really need to work hard to kind of break through the noise and sort of position yourself differently and do something that is memorable. So the main thing that when you're working with investors and you're trying to think about storytelling for investors, I kind of think that there are three really main points that you want to kind of drive home with the storytelling. You want to get them to empathize, you want to get them energized, and you want to get them engaged with what it is that you're presenting and pitching. So just kind of a preview of what we're going to be covering today. So we're going to be kind of setting the stage. We're going to be talking about must-haves because at the end of the day, this is really a business transaction. This is a business relationship. So there are very specific business points that investors are going to want to see. How to get started, where to start, how to develop content, because I think that can be really daunting when you're thinking about, how do I tell this story in a way that makes sense? And then how to structure that story. And then finally, we'll just go over some do's and don'ts that hopefully you can walk away from or walk away with. So I think that the first thing that, it's kind of interesting to talk about is different styles of writing and different types of writing. So on one extreme, you have like a report, right? And the report, it's a dense document. It might be like 200 pages long of just statistics, information, just tons of, it's almost exhaustive, right? A report, and it should be, it's a report, and that's exactly what it's doing. And then kind of on the other end of the spectrum, you have storytelling, which is really more of the theatrical, dramatic piece. And that could be anything from a novel to a movie to a piece of music. There are all kinds of different ways that people are telling stories from a dramatic perspective. And really, presentations kind of fall right in the middle there. You need to have facts, you need to have figures, you need to have statistics and a business case there, but you also have a story to tell, and you want to make sure that you're weaving in parts of this story, parts of your narrative into these stats and figures to kind of to again make yourself really stand out from the crowd and give you kind of a one up with that personal sort of narrative there. Um, and I think it's really important to understand your why. Like, why are you doing this? You may have just, like, oh, I had a great idea, and so I'm just going to put it out on paper, and I want to make $1 million overnight. And that's not really a good why. So I think that it's really important to kind of establish your founder story. And this is going to be something that is, excuse me, this is like where you're going. How did you get there? What do you care about the particular problem that you're solving? And then your vision story, which is really going to help build engagement. Why are we doing this? Why does this problem need to be solved? Why should you join this company? So this is really, you're establishing deeper motivations, you're showcasing ambition, you're generating excitement. And these two stories kind of come together to help craft an arc for a presentation narrative. Um, and I love this quote from Ben Horowitz, and he's one of the founding partners of Andreessen Horowitz. And he says, a company without storytelling is usually a company without strategy. And I think this is really interesting because when you think about it, your story really can be your strategy. If you make your story better, then your strategy is going to be better because stories provide a purpose for organizations and the framework for growth. So you have your purpose, and here you're presenting within a business case the framework for scaling within that story and how you're thinking about your story from a business perspective, as well as from that personal and founder perspective. Um, one thing that I think is really important to keep in mind, especially when you're in these early stages, is investors are betting on you. And, I don't know if everybody here is from Louisville. I am from beautiful Louisville, Kentucky. We're coming up on Derby. So I thought this was a really good analogy to kind of perceive how investors are thinking about early stage companies and what they are thinking about when they're talking about investment with you. And that's really, going into a relationship, a partnership with you, the entrepreneur, your company, your team, because your company, if it's early stage, you don't have a ton of traction yet. Things are still really early. And so the investor, there's not a ton of business metrics there. So investor really needs to be bought into you and your story, your founder journey, your vision. Why are you the best at this? What does your market look like? And have you done your homework on it? So, making a case for you is really going to be appealing to investors because you're really establishing trust, you're developing empathy, and you're getting them engaged with your content. Um, so, that said, I think it's really important to know that there are, this is a business transaction at the end of the day. They're investing money and they want to get a return on that money. So there are going to be very specific questions that, excuse me, there are going to be very specific questions that investors are going to want to, that are going to want answers to. So I think it's really important to remember some of these questions when you are thinking about your narrative. And making sure that you're answering some of these questions. So, how big is this market? Is it a market that has the ability to grow and to scale? What are your moats? And if you're not familiar with the term moat, if you think of like a castle, there's a moat around it to kind of keep invaders out. And so moats around your business will help you stand out from the competition and protect you. How are you going to make money? right? Like this is an important thing at the end of the day. It's all about making money. Who are you selling to? What is the competition? Who's on your team? What's next? These are questions that you're going to have to be prepared to answer, regardless of your story, and how brave it is. There are a lot of frameworks out there for like these are the 10 slides that you must have inside your presentation. And it's true, but I really like to kind of think of these slides as more of like a checklist than something that's prescriptive. You really need to, again, kind of thinking back here, answer these questions within this kind of framework, within these particular slides. But I don't think that you have to necessarily follow like a problem solution binary, for example. You just kind of need to make sure that you're addressing these questions and coming up with content that would fit these slides. But you don't have, this is not a prescription. This is really suggestions and making sure that you are covering the business aspects as well as telling a compelling story. And Kiana, I think that you hit on this earlier when you were saying, people really remember the stories. And I think that's really important. I like this quote from Ariana Huffington, people think in stories, not statistics. So if you think about, kind of in school, for example, you may remember a story, how a teacher made you feel, something that you learned. You may not necessarily remember the statistics and all of the facts behind it, but, Kiana, as you mentioned, you will remember the story and you will remember that kind of feeling that you walk away from. And so when you're thinking about a story, I kind of like to think about it in this, and this is, excuse me, something interesting to kind of think about. It's really thinking in acts, not slides, right? So if we're thinking in stories, not statistics, I think it's important to think in acts, not slides, which is why I don't think that you necessarily have to prescribe to those 10 specific slides within that format. So in Act 1, you're really setting this up like, why should I care? And this is from the investor's perspective. Why should I care? Here you really want to earn attention. Why you? Why is this interesting? Act 2 is really why should I believe? Why should an investor believe in you? Here you really want to spend a lot of time de-risking your approach. What have you done to increase the odds of success? And then the third act is why should I join, right? Like, why should I buy into this? Why should I invest in your company? So here's where you really want to broaden your case. So things like, here's how it gets huge. Here's how features can turn into a massive marketplace. So you're answering these questions. And if you think about it, it really is kind of like kind of a nice story arc. So you're kind of building your case, you sort of reach this climax, and then you're broadening your case there towards the end. And we're going to go into this in a lot more depth later on in the presentation. But if we're thinking in acts, I don't recommend starting here because if you start in PowerPoint or Google Slides or Keynote or even like on a Word doc or a Google Sheet, excuse me, a Google Doc, then, I think that it's a little bit daunting. If you start working in slides, you're just going to end up with slides. You're not going to end up with a narrative. You're not going to end up with a story. You might be sufficing the ask for creating those 10 slides that investors want to see, but you're not creating a compelling story and you're not doing anything that's really going to make you stand out to an investor. So I really think that sticky notes are your storytelling bestie. I am a big believer in brainstorming, and I think that when you're doing brainstorming, you just kind of get it all out there. Even if you think the idea is lame, you can take it out later. But I am a big believer in sticky notes when you're kind of crafting the story, when you're crafting your narrative. Um, so go out and get some sticky notes, get them in different colors so that you can organize them, but we'll get into all of that in just a little bit. I think that it's really important, and one of the pieces that I think it can be very daunting, like we were talking about, is content and how to get started with that content. So, you have your sticky notes. So now how do we create pitch content for specific focus areas? So we're going to go through all 5 of these buckets in a lot more detail. So the first one that we're going to be talking about is pitch plots. And I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on this because I think this is really the genesis of everything that you're going to base your story off of kind of moving forward. This is really your high level pitch. This is, kind of you explaining what's changing in the world that makes it the right moment for your company and why are you the one to do it. And so to demonstrate this, I don't normally do this, but I think this is such a great example of a high level pitch that I wanted to kind of play this video for you guys. It's a couple of minutes, so bear with me, but hopefully there'll be some good, there will be some good takeaways, and we'll break those down shortly.
Hello, TechCrunch. My name is Aaron Bale, and I am the founder and CEO of Carbon Health. With me on stage are my co-founders, Tom Berry and Dr. Greg Ralph. As crazy as it may sound, we are building a healthcare system from scratch. Let me tell you guys why. 8 years ago, I moved from Turkey to Silicon Valley to start a company called Udemy. Udemy is now the world's largest marketplace for online courses. I was lucky to witness how a seemingly undisruptible market could be transformed with the power of networks. But a few years ago, my attention moved from education to healthcare. My mom had a rare disease called neurosarcoidosis. Going from doctor to doctor with hundreds of pages of documents and desperately trying to tell her story to doctors made me look at healthcare with fresh eyes. So since that day, my mom recovered, which was great. But I have been imagining this healthcare system where doctors, nurses, labs, pharmacies, all across the country can collaborate to give the best possible care to their patients. Almost like everybody was part of one amazing hospital. Almost like world's largest hospital. But obviously that's crazy, but you cannot create a hospital from scratch. There are tens of things that make it. But I'm not really convinced. Let's take a look at what a hospital is. At its core, there are doctors who give the actual care. They are the heroes of the system. The hospital itself is mostly an administrative layer that handles things like registration, billing, and shared access to medical records. Turns out, you can replace most of these things with technology. And just like Udemy became the world's largest school, and Airbnb is the world's largest hotel network without owning any buildings, and Uber is the world's largest cab company without owning a single car. We believe that the world's largest hospital won't be about buildings. Instead, it's going to be a ubiquitous technology platform that connects us with our doctors. And that's exactly what we are doing at Carbon Health. I'll let my co-founder.
Okay. So thank you guys for listening to that. And I think it's really important to kind of break down some of the pieces that make this a really good high level pitch. Oops, sorry about that. So what Aaron is doing here is, first of all, he's establishing credibility. He's saying, he's not a first-time founder. He established Udemy, which is obviously a huge success. You may not have a Udemy under your belt, but you obviously have some kind of credibility that you can bring to the table. So he's establishing credibility really early on. He's calling in a life experience, right? So his mom had an illness. This really got his wheels turning. So he's drawing from personal experience to make this compelling and make this personal. He's pulling in comparisons. So he's comparing, like you don't have to necessarily have a building to have a hospital in the same way that Airbnb doesn't necessarily have to have a hotel or any real estate to be able to create the Airbnb experience. So he's drawing comparisons with familiar companies, familiar concepts that people know so that he can easily relate to the vision that he's presenting here with Carbon Health. He's challenging assumptions. I love when he says, I'm not convinced by this. And I think most crucially, he's explaining what is being built and why he's building it. And so I think it's really important to kind of establish your high level pitch, your high level concept really early on to kind of create that hook that's going to get investors wanting more and create cohesion throughout your entire narrative of your deck. So we're going to be looking at some different pitch plots and we're going to be breaking each one of these down. So one thing that I would say when you're doing your sticky note exercise is, take a look at these pitch plots and kind of start outlining on your sticky notes what might work, what might not work for you, and really start crafting your pitch plot around those particular ideas that you're coming up with from your sticky notes. So the first pitch plot, and we're going to be going over some beats with each of these plots. So the first pitch plot is starting over. And the idea here with this one is really to kind of paint a picture of a market or an industry or a workflow, something that might be kind of stuck in the past. You really want to make the audience feel and internalize this kind of criminal level of inertia, whether it's through statistics or images or a powerful anecdote. You're beginning with like, this is the mess that our market is today, right? Like it's stuck in the past. Here's how it got here. So the next beat is really all about educating your audience. Help them understand, why does the market look the way it does? Is it because of incumbents? Is it because of a lack of innovation? Is it because there was something that had to be but no longer is the case? For example, in the carbon health high level pitch, he's talking about all of these different pieces of bureaucracy that could all be handled by technology. But here's how it got here. So, that's also kind of setting it up from, what if we could start over from scratch? What if we could wipe the slate clean? And then you really want to lean into how your company has a distinct advantage because you are a new entrant into this space. And then go into, this is what we've done. So here you're contrasting your solution with kind of this mess, this like stagnant and gross, hairy mess that you've described earlier. You want to be able to walk your audience through how your product works with a focus on very specific tangible differences that result from starting from scratch. There's a benefit there. And I think that this particular pitch plot works best when you're educating investors on a market that's unfamiliar territory. Conversely, you don't want to educate an investor with a story they already know. So if you are working in healthcare and your investor may have already had, excuse me, maybe they've had a couple of successful exits with other healthcare companies, you don't need to give them the background of all of the healthcare industry and the big hairy problems there, because they already know it. So don't over educate or create redundant information that way. You do want to spend time thinking about, and this is a great way to kind of bring out your sticky notes, consider what it is about your approach that makes it unique. Why are you the one to come in and disrupt this market by being an early entrant into it? So that's the first pitch plot. The second pitch plot is doing that over here. And I think that this is really this is a great pitch plot when there's a clear link to a specific market, what it should, would, or could be with the right technology. So the beats for this one, look at this other market or these other markets that have evolved. So like big waves move all boats, right? If it's happening in this market, it's very plausible that it could be happening in the market that you are interested in. Um, so you want to prime your approach before you introduce it. And then you're kind of going to lean into, our market has been left behind. So here you're really drawing a contrast between your thesis and you're explaining how your market works today. You want to be able to kind of hone in on pain points that are created by these forces that are not being reflected in your market. Nature abhors a vacuum, right? So then the next part of the beat is going to say, it would look like this. Here's your chance to really kind of come in and play off that analogy. You want to paint a picture of what your market could look like if you were able to come in and bring the modern standard to it. And this is exactly what we're building. So here, you're really presenting your company as kind of an agent of change between where the market is today and where and the world that you've just described, where that is. You want to be able to show simply and clearly that you are on the course to realize that vision. You don't want to argue a market that you're not familiar with or operate in. So if you are in a consumer space and you're working on a consumer app, you don't necessarily want to talk about deep tech and cyberspace, because that may be a market that you're unfamiliar with. So you want to make sure that it's a market that has relevancy that you can speak intelligently to. And you do want to make sure that you're pressure testing every single aspect of the analogy. So I've got a couple of companies listed here. Catch, they present themselves as Gusto for freelancer, Baller TV presents themselves as ESPN for amateur sports. So when you're creating these kinds of analogies, you want to make sure that you're pressure testing every aspect of it, because I assure you that investors will. So take out your sticky notes, kind of go through what are ways that investors can kind of poke holes in this analogy and start coming up with answers for that. The next pitch plot is, but here's the thing. And I think this can be a really compelling pitch plot here. It's really fantastic when you have significant industry experience and established credibility. Maybe you're an industry insider. I think for this one, it's really great. The beats kind of starting out with insiders in our market know that opening with an exciting fact or a statistic that an investor doesn't already know or wouldn't find out in their cursory research is really kind of setting you up for the next beat. This is kind of your big moment here, but here's the thing. And here's where you really want to take some time to introduce your unique insight. If it's an observation that insiders know, then you really should be able to offer a perspective that is unique, that's completely yours. So you're kind of setting yourself apart from the competition there, right? You want to go one level deeper on a statistic to reveal a hidden truth that the investor probably doesn't know. Um, then the next step is, this opens the door to a massive opportunity. And that's really to connect your unique insight. So this hook of, but here's the thing, to connect that to a business opportunity that's in front of you. The implication here is that you're armed with a unique insight that you can build a very specific type of company off of that is unlike anything else in the market. We are built for this. So introduce your business in this context. Explain clearly how everything about your company, from the product to your go-to-market, all of this has been designed to kind of exploit this new insight. When I think this doesn't work is, what I think doesn't work is using facts or insights that are familiar to your audience. You don't need to go into something that somebody already knows or something that investors already heard 20 times today. Again, I want to kind of hone in on that word unique insights. And I think, that's really the critical component to the but here's the thing plot point. You do want to validate stats and insights to ensure that they are truly unique. Excuse me. So making sure that you've done your homework there to uncover stats and insights. And a lot of times this is coming from an insider, right? They already kind of know this information. They're seeing this, but you want to be able to back that up and make sure that it is something that is truly unique. The next one is all the kids are doing it. This is a fun one, I think. And this is a really great one to use when your company is on the forefront of an emerging trend that others are not yet seeing. Figma was a great example of this because they came to market at just the right time when digital design is really kind of taking over the competition. If you look at Adobe, it's a behemoth, it's large, it takes a long time to do things. It's kind of old. Then you had Sketch, which was a fantastic tool when it first came out, but there were a lot of technological problems with it. And so Figma created this amazing solution, seeing that like, hey, all the other people are doing it, we're going to do it better. So the beats here, there's a big shift in behavior underway. This really opens up with an underlying trend that's kind of setting the foundation forth for your company. You need to give a sense that you've kind of uncovered this trend. The incumbents, they're not ready for it. You really need to, your next task is to show that the incumbents either didn't see it or they're too slow to act upon it in a meaningful and beneficial way. Adobe, for example. And then we saw it coming. Here's how we saw it coming. You want to leverage your origin story, right? Your founder story to kind of illustrate this founder market fit. You want to show that your company was built with a deep understanding of this trend and how has that translated into product development, your go-to-market, team building, etc. And then we built this company for this new world, providing early evidence that you're benefiting from this trend. This could be something like early traction, customer testimonials, but overall, you want to make sure that you're giving investors a sense that you've discovered something that is inevitable. And I think that what you don't want to do, you don't want to rely on temporary blips. So you don't want to necessarily buy into something because it's trendy. You want to be able to analyze and see like this is a holistic trend that is happening in the space. So it's not trendy, it's a long-term business trend that you see is going to happen and it's inevitable. And then you do want to explain how you're a better first market, and offer a product that people love, and most importantly, a product that can scale. Um, the last pitch plot that I'm going to give you guys to kind of think about is I took it personally. And I think this is one of the more difficult ones to really get right, but it's also one of the most effective ones. You know, if we think back to the Carbon Health pitch that we watched, he brought in a story about his mom being sick. And I think I took it personally, I think can be really a compelling narrative when you have gone through something that affected you greatly. Um, so I think the beats for this one would be, let me tell you about a time when I tried or I had to or I experienced, like really go into your personal story there. And it was an awful experience. And here's where you kind of summarize the story. And I think it's important to kind of distill it down to maybe two or three fundamental barriers that really kind of stood in the way of making this process seamless or intuitive or as easy as it could be. Um, and then I did my research. So here's where this is really important because here's where you're gonna kind of take that personal story and apply a business application to. So you wanna walk through the steps that you've taken to understand the problem. So who did you talk to? What did you learn about the size and the scope of the problem? How long did you spend iterating on your idea? Who will you be able to recruit to help kind of come in and tackle this challenge? These are the stories that really resonate with investors and give them the confidence that you're committed to solving this problem from a business perspective. And then I built the solution that I would want can kind of lead into illustrating how your product solves the problem that you were facing, right? But you want to quickly transition that into a product that you can bring to market at large, because again, this is a business transaction. It's business. So this is really your chance to demonstrate that in solving a problem for yourself, you've really uncovered this massive business opportunity. Something you don't want to do is you don't want to rely on a problem that's extremely complex or esoteric, right? Like this one is all about building empathy. And if you create a problem that is too complex or it's just really out there in left field, you're not going to be able to develop that empathy. But I think that this is really, really important for this particular pitch plot is to be authentic. It needs to be authentic. It needs to generate empathy. It needs to be relatable. And you also need to show that you've done your homework from a business perspective, because this is really about a persuasive narrative more so than a personal narrative. It's important to interweave those personal stories into it, but at the end of the day, this is business. Okay, so that's kind of covering pitch plots. The next thing that I would encourage you to do is kind of defining risks and rewards. So what's at stake? Put on your investor hat, get out your sticky notes, and start kind of plotting out some risks and rewards. So look for risks. Throughout, these, and here's some prompts to help you get started on laying out risks. Is there a market that might become oversaturated, or is there the potential to have a market decline? How sustainable are you against the competition? Are there technological advancements that could potentially render your company obsolete? How agile are you? How willing are you to adopt new technology? Kind of the same thing with regulatory changes. Are there regulatory changes that could impact your business? And are you going to be agile enough to kind of pivot with that? Operational, what are key operational challenges that you might face? And then, reputational, how might customer feedback, public perception, media coverage, how might these things impact your business? So kind of working within these kinds of prompts, start laying out specific risks that an investor might be wary of when you're pitching to them. And then on the flip side, you also might want to think about rewards and how those rewards can kind of pay off and why the rewards are going to outweigh those risks that you've already identified. So market opportunity, market can work in your favor this way. What does your unique startup fulfill? How large is this potential market? If it's a huge market like healthcare, that could actually work in your favor. How does your product or service innovate or improve upon existing solutions? Do you have the potential to scale? And if so, how big do you think you can scale? What do financial returns look like? Do you have strategic partnerships? Are there opportunities that exist within those strategic partnerships? And could those help enhance your business model or your market research? So kind of thinking about rewards that you can spin that are going to outweigh the risks that investors be wary of. So if we look at, for example, carbon health, and this is just kind of an example overview. Obviously, you could go into a lot more detail, but when you're thinking about healthcare, there are a lot of risks, right? It's not necessarily an easy field to want to invest in. It's highly regulated. It's a behemoth. It's slow to adopt change, and there's not a lot of incentive really to change in that field. But on the flip side, it is a behemoth, which means it's a big industry that's using a lot of outdated methods, as we saw. It needs cost control measures. And it's a pain point. There's a pain point here that an investor, really anybody, can easily identify with. So you're creating empathy and kind of saying, I know that there are pain points and I know that these pain points can be solved. So that's a reward. Okay, so the next piece of content that I think is kind of fun to brainstorm and workshop are, writing your value proposition. How is your company going to change the world? How is this amazing? What are you doing here? And I think that it's really important. This should kind of go without saying, but it doesn't. Don't gloss over what your product does. Like, don't just kind of get in the weeds and start talking about financials and facts and figures and statistics, and then you just forget to really talk about what your product does. A lot of times, you have founders that have these great ideas and they have a ton of stats to back it up, but they can't explain succinctly what their product does, what's their category, who is it for, what does it do. So don't gloss over that. You want to create a pithy and succinct value proposition. So you don't want to create something that is just really esoteric, that's super wordy, that's going to take you a long time to explain. Again, when we're thinking about empathy, energizing, and engaging an investor, coming up with a pithy and succinct value proposition is going to be a really quick way for you to tell your story and get investors to understand what you do and why you're doing it. We're going to start with a couple of prompts here. So the first prompt would be to just kind of write a single sentence description. And what that might look like is you're going to have your product category, so what it is, and then for the new domain, who it's for, what it is and who it's for. And so we're going to use Slack as our example. I feel like most people know what Slack is. So I thought that would be a good example to kind of run through this exercise with. So Slack is a team communication platform for modern workplaces and remote teams. So what it is, it's a team communication platform, and who it's for, modern workplaces and remote teams. So very succinctly, you're defining your category and your domain. The second prompt would be to define your key benefit and what makes you different. What's your special sauce, right? Or Guy Kawasaki might call it your underlying magic. What makes you different? So that template might look something like what you deliver and what's unique about your approach. And so to kind of piggyback off of Slack here, so Slack centralizes messages, tools, and files in one easy to use platform, reducing reliance on emails and meetings. So it's a little bit wordier, but you can see here that you're explaining your key benefit. So you're centralizing messages, tools, and files, and your primary differentiator, reducing reliance on emails and meetings. So this is really kind of setting you apart from the competition here. And then the next prompt is going to be kind of taking those pieces and sort of defining your value proposition based off of those two sort of simple sentences that you've come up with. So that template is going to look something like our company name is what your product does, for who it's for, and then you're bringing in a key benefit. So when we kind of put it all together, we come up with a value proposition that looks something like Slack transforms modern workspaces and remote teams with a single streamlined platform, cutting through the clutter of emails and endless meetings to keep your focus sharp and your team in sync. So it's a little bit wordier, but it's still using plain English. It's straightforward. You're defining who it is or what it is and who it's for. You're defining your key benefit. what makes you unique, and you're outlining really in one sentence what you're doing and what your value proposition is. And I think that this is a really important exercise because a lot of times founders can get in the weeds with these other pieces of their business that they're focusing on. And so it's really easy to say, like, I know what my product does, so I don't need to explain it. But you actually do, because your investor doesn't know what your product is. So take the time to really outline, define your value proposition, and make sure that you're clearly able to explain what it is, who it's for, why it's unique, and why someone should invest in you. Okay, so the next bit of content, the next content focus area that we're going to talk about is problem solved. So how does your company solve a key customer pain point? So the first thing that I would say is, don't make your problem overly complex. Even if you have maybe you're working in something that is like healthcare or like deep tech that has a lot of complexity to it, try to figure out ways to make that problem feel less complex, so that it doesn't feel insurmountable, that you have a very strategic vision for solving this particular problem within a complex industry. And so some ways to kind of think about solving for complexity are by using an analogy, using targeted data, or, telling a story. Since we're talking about storytelling, this would be almost like a micro story to kind of explain the complexity of the situation in terms that just about anybody can understand, and really get that investor to empathize and understand the complexity here. So using an analogy. So something like, um, you might want to take out your sticky notes here and start thinking about analogies. Like, what is your business? What are some comparisons to your business? And what are some comparisons to your solution? So we're looking at Slack again. If office communication is like sending letters, Slack is like having a conversation in a coffee shop. If saving and sharing files is like mailing a physical package, Dropbox makes it like sharing a link in an instant message. If processing online payments was like navigating a maze, Stripe is like walking a straight path. So here what we're doing is we're taking, tangible real world experiences that just about anyone can relate to, and we're juxtaposing that with something that is easy, that is also real world. So we're removing complexity. We're not getting into the heavy tech. We're not getting into the details necessarily, but we are creating an analogy and contrasting, past and future. The second way to solve for complexity is by showcasing, a heavy hitting fact. Now, you don't want to necessarily overwhelm investors or stack your deck full of a bunch of statistics. As we stated earlier, those statistics a lot of times are going to kind of come in one ear and fly out the other. But if there's a huge statistic that's really speaking to your business case, go ahead and lean into that to help investors understand the complexity of the scenario. So this is a slide that I did not too long ago, and this is for a startup who's working with healthcare data. And I thought that this was a good one to pull as an example because they're showcasing, hey, healthcare data is an $80 billion market, right? Like, this is massive. And not only that, but it's a massive opportunity because 97% of this data remains untapped. So 97% of that goes unused. And I think this is a stat that's going to be really impactful because at a glance, you're explaining, here's how big the market is, and here's how much real estate that that we can actually get into. And then the third solve would be to kind of tell a story. So like make it something relatable around the complex situation. So if you were to take something like, Airbnb, for example, I'm just using that one because it's something everybody knows. Potentially your story might look something like, this is Jenny. She loves traveling. She loves traveling to experience different cultures in different countries. The problem that she's experienced with traveling is that hotels are oftentimes expensive. She's budget conscious, or they don't really give you a genuine feel of the place that you're traveling. So she's found different alternatives, whether it was hostels or budget hotels, but each option comes with its own kind of set of compromises. Then she does some discoveries. So in her research, she comes across Airbnb, who provides a solution where she's able to get set up with someone who's in her peer group that has an apartment in the center of Rome where she can go and travel and then have the most amazing experience of her life because she used Airbnb to create this memorable experience where she was able to really live the life of a local, right? So kind of taking the complexity of your specific problem and breaking it out into something tangible, whether that be with a real world analogy, compare and contrast, whether you're using a hard hitting stat to kind of drive home, like, hey, this is a big market and we can be major players here, or whether you're, creating a little micro story to get investors or your audience to understand the problem. These are some ways that you can take some really complex issues and kind of break them down into meaningful, impactful ways that people can understand. And then the last little bit of pitch content that we're going to be focusing on is evidence. So why you and no one else? And I think that it's important to note that stories will evolve kind of like strategies. And when you're early on, we talked about this briefly, when you're early on, the investors are really going to be focusing more on your vision and your team and less on the execution. Now, as you continue on your journey, that story and your strategy is going to change, and it's going to be a lot more about execution and trajectory than your vision. And again, kind of going back to the horse jockey analogy, investors are betting on you. So one way to show traction, a lot of people want to go right into numbers. When you're early stage, a lot of people want to kind of fluff their numbers and they want to say, in 5 years, I'm going to be $1 billion valuation. You don't know that. And investors know that you don't know that, and they know that. So here are some other ways to kind of think about how to showcase traction, and why you are a good fit here. Like, what is the evidence? And show that you've done your homework and the size of the market, credibility, quotes from important people. Do you have defensible IP? Do you have a growing user base? Why is the timing right? So there are lots of other ways to kind of show traction and provide evidence as to why you are a good fit here. And how are you delivering value right now? You want to be able to answer this question as part of your evidence and your traction there. And most importantly, I think you want to speak with conviction. You want to speak with conviction because you really want to let the audience know that you believe in this. You believe in yourself so much that the investor has no choice but to believe in you. This is an interesting quote, and this quote is within the framework of, or within the context of Chris Sacca from Lowercase Capital, and he was talking to Kevin Systrom, who is the founder of Instagram, and he was having trouble really understanding, why is this going to be a big deal? Why should I pay attention to this? But he said that Kevin spoke with such conviction that he couldn't say no. So conviction about the inevitability of success is contagious. And I know we're running out of time, so I'm gonna kind of try to fly through these. I'm gonna skip that part because we've already gone through it. So now what? So now you've kind of gone through all of these exercises. You might have a wall that looks something like this. So now we really need to think about structuring your narrative. And structure is what really makes a story. So when you think about, like, let's think about food, for example, because we all know food, right? If you think about your Post-it notes, that's really kind of like a shopping list. It's kind of these arbitrary pieces that all mean something, but unless you have a tangible piece of food or you have a tangible structure, it's kind of arbitrary, right? So you think about tacos. Now you get to the grocery store and you forgot your list, but it's taco night. You understand the structure of a taco. So you're going to be a lot more inclined to be able to make those decisions on purchasing the right ingredients to make your taco there because you understand the structure of it. You've had tacos, you know tacos. So then we're going to kind of think about how to create this persuasive narrative. So take your wall of stickies and start putting them into buckets. So I'm kind of creating these buckets based off of those burning questions, those 10 slides. This is not necessarily prescriptive, but this is just kind of some buckets that I like to use. So your intro and problem, opportunity and solution, market size, your evidence or traction, why now, why us, and the ask. So you can kind of start taking your sticky notes and putting them in organized buckets and crafting your narrative based off of that. And again, don't forget that you have to answer these burning questions and you have to satisfy these specific pieces that investors are going to be looking for. And I'm going to skip over this one because again, I know we're running out of time, but what could, how could those slides work within this particular framework? And so here you're kind of, you're making your case and then you're showing that it's been validated, you're de-risking your approach. The climax is kind of your vision, and then you're coming into broadening your case with financials and the ask. And I think this is a fine structure. What's interesting to me, though, is if you all are not familiar with Nancy Duarte, I highly recommend that you look her up. She is a phenomenal storyteller. She's been doing this and kind of has set the bar for storytelling inside of a presentation design. And she was looking for like a shape that really kind of defines the persuasive narrative. And so she found this from Gustav Freytag, who is a novelist, that this kind of shape actually is really wonderful in terms of explaining persuasive narratives. So you've got your exposition, this rising call to action, a climax, and then falling action. And then you have what's called a denouement, which is your resolution. And so what this might look like when you're thinking about breaking your story out into different acts is something like this. And so you've kind of got these different pieces where you're creating this rhythm of past and future. You've got what she calls a call to adventure. So this is like getting people to buy in, making your case. And then she also has this call to action. So this is getting an investor to want to invest in you. So breaking this down a little bit, when we're looking at these kinds of ebbs and flows, you have reality, so what it is, right? So kind of thinking back to our pitch plots, what it is and where it could be is hope. So you're kind of creating this like tension and release pattern as you're kind of structuring your story. And what's important is the gap. This is your idea. So how are you going to get from where we are to where it could be? You really want to go all in on contrast because this is going to create something that's compelling, that's going to make the narrative really flow. And I think that it's also important to figure out like how are you going to mingle your story into this narrative, into the spark line. So I think that it's a great idea to kind of draw this out on your whiteboard and start putting stickies into how your story could flow into these different particular slides and different problems that you're addressing. The other thing that she will emphasize is that you should establish your star moment. And star is something they'll always remember. So this could be complex numbers, it could be images or diagrams, props, something that investors are gonna walk away remembering, something that could be repeatable. So this could be, yeah, emotive anecdote, shocking statistics, memorable dramatization. There are a number of ways that you can create your star moment, and it doesn't really matter where in the structure it goes. It just needs to exist. So figure that out. What could be your star moment? Thinking through that. And I know, I'm sorry, we're running out of time, so I'm going to quickly go through my do's and don'ts here. So you do want to start with a strong opening hook. So we talked about that, right? You don't want to stick to the problem solution binary. You want to make this unique. Your story is unique. You have a brave story to tell. So don't be afraid to really start out with that. Plant a flag. You want to say, I am the expert in this field. You don't necessarily want to attempt to appeal to everybody. You want to say, I'm an expert here. I'm an industry insider, planting your flag and showing that you're the right person for that job. Creating intrigue. So make it intriguing, make it compelling, make it a story that has ebbs and flows and contrasts and a narrative. Don't go too text heavy on your slides because then you're losing that storytelling perspective. Investors are just reading your slides. They're not actually listening to what you have to say. You're losing that empathy. Iterate, iterate, iterate. Do not ignore feedback or let your story get stale. Every time you pitch, you should be iterating on your story. What worked, what didn't work, fine-tuning that. And then lastly, always be pitching. Always be pitching. Like practice your pitch all the time, whether that's just working on your value prop or you're pitching to your friends, you're at a cocktail party. Always be practicing bits and pieces of your pitch and the entire pitch. So don't go into a meeting unpracticed and underprepared. And then the last thing that I'll leave you with is this quote from Nancy Duarte: "Conveying your vision effectively is about creating a dream that people will jump into and commit to." So again, I think it's really about spinning a story that you can speak to, whether you're an industry insider, it's a personal story, effectively, and you're creating this dream and you're speaking with such conviction that investors are going to want to jump into, they're going to want to commit to, and they're going to want to learn more about it. So I think that I flew through that last piece really quickly, but I know we're running out of time, so I want to leave it open for any questions if there's time for that.
All right, so we have some comments in the chat. Lisa says, great notes for crafting an investor pitch. Thank you, Shala. Tiffany, yes, so everyone will be able to access a recording of this presentation, which obviously includes the slides, on the Amplified Louisville YouTube page. And in the follow-up for this meeting, the follow-up email, I'll include the link so that you can easily find it and reference the link there, or you can just go to our Amplified Louisville YouTube channel and the recording will be there. And sometimes, depending on the logistics of YouTube that change quite often, sometimes it lists under the video tab and sometimes it lists under the live tab. It just depends on what they're doing these days. So check both if you don't see it there. Charlie O asked, are you available for private consultations?
Yes, I am. Actually, yeah.
Yeah, so what I'll do also in the follow-up, Charlie, is make sure, well, you can scan the screen here, the QR code, Shala's email address and social media handle is listed here. I will also make sure that this information is included in the follow-up email along with Shala's LinkedIn profile link. And Charlie also says, how has generative AI changed or is changing storytelling on pitching and investor expectations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I figured that one was going to come up because it's such a hot topic right now. So there are lots of tools out there that can kind of harness generative AI to help you build that story and build your deck. The one thing that I will warn against, and I think this is really true for any time you're using generative AI, is that you want to make sure that you're prompting and molding into something that is unique to you, right? Because at the end of the day, you're really trying to set yourself apart from the crowd. So, relying entirely on generative AI is not necessarily going to be the best way to do that. So you can use it to kind of help you fill in gaps, create a structure or create a story and give it meaning, but you want to make sure that you're putting that personal touch on it. I think generative AI is also good for coming up with creating some designs for decks that are not overly text heavy. But at the end of the day, this is your business, it's your idea, it's your company, it's what you're selling. You are going into this relationship with an investor and vice versa. So while generative AI can be a really great tool in helping you understand the story and how to tell it, at the end of the day, this is all about you and your vision. So make sure that you're not excluding that portion as well.
That's awesome advice, great advice. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up, you all. We are both available if you need us. Shala, thank you so much. This was wonderful. Once
Thank you.
again, you are constantly dropping gems. I learned so much myself. Shifting the perspective from slides to act makes so much sense and it's so helpful. And thank you for all of the knowledge that you continuously drop for us. To those who are participating with us today, if you have not registered, there will be another part to this series happening next week, where we will be talking about how do you shift the narrative and how you speak about your pitch. How do you pitch to different audiences? So if you have not registered, please make sure you do so you don't miss out on that. As we stated, all of the follow-up information that you all requested will be in the follow-up email. Thank you all for joining us today, and we hope to see you again next week. Shala, thank you. And until then, To find out more about things like this, make sure that you're following Amplify Louisville on all socials, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. Events are listed on our website, and everything across the board is Amplify Louisville and amplifylouisville.com. And until next time, have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks so much, guys. Take care.